Mexico back again with another live dev interview, this time with Jason Booth, the shader legend. This was taken from my live Twitch stream, all the w's.twitch.tv/themessycoder, and this is a big one. I was asked by many people to stop chopping them up into smaller pieces, so here we go. It's a massive interview. It will destroy my YouTube rankings and all that algorithm stuff, but you know what? I'll do it for you, because I love you. And you know who else loves you? Jason Booth! So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you all in a moment. Jace, did you know that you happened to be in a sale?
Yes.
It's amazing that you did know.
Yeah, I don't pay that much attention, but I did know about the sale. I think the Terrain Collection and the HDRP plugin were chosen for it, so...
I didn't know that you did a low poly add-on for MicroSplat as well.
You mean my marketing didn't get through to you?
Now, I think you might have even said it to my face, and I might not know that you've done it.
Right.
That is. Can I get an exclamation mark Jason in chat, please, from someone, so I can have a quick link to Jason Booth page? I've actually made a bit.ly link that says Jason Booth, so that Jace himself can't make his own bit.ly link with his name. I own your name.
Where does it go?
It goes to me.
Oh.
It goes to my Twitch page. No, it goes to... that'd be so evil.
It goes to the asset store, but with your affiliate, I bet.
There you go. That's exactly so that my kids can eat.
Right.
So I'm looking now on the page, and again, your marketing is amazing, because the first, like, your promo video is the MegaSplat video.
For what? For me?
Yeah. So if you go to your publisher page,
if you go to the new one I just finished. Exactly,
because I know as much as you love MegaSplat, MicroSplat has become your favorite child now.
Oh yeah.
So the oldest child basically has now been kicked out, lives in the shed. MicroSplat's got the bedroom all for himself.
Yep.
And all of his mates are around now. The HDRP support, mesh workflow from down the street, Digger integration. That we had people in the Discord. Where's Son Goku? Is he here? Very excited that you got Digger integration. He was spamming Discord all about it. Showing it off.
Yeah, and it's not just Digger like runs. You can actually texture and use all the MicroSplat features on it, and blow holes in the terrain and still drive a tank over it and have tracks leaving behind and stuff like that.
And straight away he comes in, but no HDRP. I think HDRP doesn't exist yet. Isn't it still in beta?
No, they've considered it production ready, but I would tend to disagree with them on that point.
Okay. Should we, before we kick into the promo proper, should we touch on again the history of HDRP with Unity? For those unaware.
I mean, I can rant about SOPs for a long time, as you know.
That's why I bring you on, for a good rant.
They're basically like, hey, let's just have 3 completely separate rendering engines that have no commonality between them for no reason, and make you all write everything from scratch over for each of them. That's pretty much what they did.
Well, there must be some logic to it.
Well, I think what happened is they had this idea for a scriptable pipeline, and they said, hey, we should probably build more than one to prove that, you can do different ways to do things. And they said, let's have a high-end one and a low-end one. And then they said, well, the low-end one should actually become the one that everyone uses, that works across all platforms and does everything for everybody. So we'll call it the universal render pipeline and keep extending it. And then they ditched surface shaders, which was their shader abstraction for the lighting model. And so that means that now everybody has to deal with the really low levels of it. And so every week or two that they release a new point release of it, they break something, and then you have to basically redo a lot of your work. And they don't provide any documentation or any real list of those changes. When they do provide lists of changes, they're usually missing the things that actually break stuff in the list. So it's basically hours of searching through their GitHub, looking at change lists, trying to figure out what they changed, why they changed it over thousands of files.
So that basically means anyone who was hoping to use a HDRP integration with an existing asset or product, likelihood every time they do an update, everything they previously used will no longer work.
It's also worse than that because the problem is that it's not like there's a 2019.3 version of the HDRP or the URP. For instance, on URP, if you download the early versions of 2019.3 and install the pipeline, you will get 7.16. Then you'll start to get 7.18, then 7.21, and now you get 7.31. And some of those have breaking changes in them. So there's actually no fully working version for any particular version of Unity. And on top of that, if you have a bunch of assets in your project and one of them works on 7.21, another one works on 7.18 because they actually have different shadow mapping code, then you've got to choose between the assets because essentially, you can't support them both. So they're basically just making a giant mess of compatibility and destroying the trust that things just work in Unity with this current plan. What they need to do is provide a proper shader abstraction level layer so that you can write shaders and have them just work, which to some degree you get from the shader graph if you only do stuff in the shader graph, but that doesn't let you get low-level control. And the other thing that they need to do is unify releases to be on Unity version releases so that there is a version for 2019.3, and any future versions that ship on that only contain fixes, not new features or changing things that break previous versions. Without that, you run into basically a giant compatibility mess that nobody can solve.
But you'd think that would be standard, standard version control, release management.
It would be if they were thinking about things from a stability mindset, but they very much aren't. They are thinking about it not as somebody who has to support multiple projects from multiple people running. They're thinking about it as, hey, just upgrade to the latest, upgrade all your stuff, do everything in the shader graph, never do anything outside of the shader graph, and maybe you'll be safe. And that's not really compatible with writing high-performance shaders or complex shaders. You can never write something like I'm writing in graph.
And remind me again, because we have this chat every now and again. Remind me,
Yep.
Why have you not just after smacking your head against the wall for so long, said, you know what, I'm going over to Unreal?
Well, actually, I just received an Epic Mega Grant, so I'm going to be doing some stuff over on Unreal. They basically just handed me money to do pretty much whatever I want with. I pitched them on, hey, maybe I'll do some terrain stuff, and they said, here's a bunch of money, go make something for our store. And that's kind of the night and day difference between how Unity is handling the store versus how Unreal is. Unreal is, Epic in general is very developer friendly, very supportive of developers, and they're willing to just pay me to make something for their store, and they're not recouping any of that money. Versus Unity, which everything is kind of a fight, and they just keep making it harder and harder for publishers to support their products. So I'm not giving up on the stuff I've done in Unity. I love what I've built here, but I have several fully ready products I built that I won't release because they would require me maintaining SRP compatibility. And it's just impossible to do that on more than one project. I spend 50% of my development time just fixing bugs with SRPs right now. Yeah. Yeah, it's totally crazy. But this is where they've put things, so. Yep. Yep. And I'll only do things in that family because it has it's the one place where I'm building the adapters for the SRPs. What I've basically done is built my own surface shader system, and so I still write everything as if it's a surface shader, and then my adapters compile them into the SRP.
Oh, just my microphone, because I'm using a button to turn it on and off. I double tapped, so I didn't come back on. So yeah, chat was like, didn't hear a word I said, but you heard me, which was lovely. But you answered it, which made more sense. Messi, we don't hear you. Well, you hear me now. Basically, I was saying how. You heard me? Did you hear me ask the question about Unreal in the first place? Hopefully you did. Otherwise, it would be bizarre, Jason, just talking about Unreal out of nowhere. And then I was saying about how there is, even though, like Jason's saying, it is a massive pain in the bum, all of the shader stuff, but he still has this massive arsenal of MicroSplat tools, which then prompted his answer, which now makes sense. Like you have it's a what's that program Americans watch? Jeopardy. That's it. Where you get the answer first and then you have to guess the question. Is that right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, you go. We just invented Jeopardy on Twitch, so that's awesome. And while we're talking about all of the many things that you keep on rolling out, you may have things on the shelf that you're not going to release, but you've got loads here. You seem to be churning them out pretty quick, though.
Well, it doesn't actually take me that long to produce a new module for a bunch of new features if I have a clear idea of what I want to do. The real time in asset development is really in support. And so a lot of what I spend time on is not only doing support, dealing with SRPs, but also like designing these things to produce the least amount of support requests, because it's very costly to do support. And also have my normal work. But yeah, it's for me to make a new module is not a ton of development time initially. So it's easy for me to spin it up, but if I'm not careful, I end up in a place where I'm then tied down to lots of support requests. And for instance, I pulled my stochastic sampling for the Unity shader graph node from the store because Unity basically took the API, which was available to developers, closed it to developers. And so to get around that, I had to essentially hack the assembly file so that I could get access to the API and get my node to work again. And then the next version of Unity, they changed the API around somewhat. And so at that point, I just said, look, this isn't worth my time to keep chasing these changes. I'm just going to pull the thing off the asset store. So if you make something that turns out to be, difficult to support, then it very quickly becomes not worth supporting. And this is why you see so much stuff abandoned on the store, because the money that you make is not worth the time it takes to support most of the time.
That's actually a fantastic question going about, because we had people just yesterday asking in Discord and the week before, is it worth being an asset store publisher? Do you actually make any money? Are people driving around in Ferraris? They used to be back in the day. Used to be worthwhile, but Unity 5.
You'll have a couple assets that will be totally worth it. If you look at something like there's that Hairbone or whatever it is asset for, that thing's always on the top of the charts. It's not a lot of code, but it works in some VR chat thing, and so everybody keeps buying it to make avatars for that, thing. And so that's probably doing very well for the amount of time it takes.
Is that why they're buying it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's included in some popular VR, or it's not VR. It's some chat thing where you have avatars, and it's what the developers included. So if you want to mod it, you have to buy it, and so that's turned into a great stream of money for some developer somewhere. And then you look at something like Shader Forge, when it was at its peak, was probably earning like a dev and a half to 2 years worth of salary, which after you, at least in this country, after you pay the self-employment tax and things, is a pretty good living wage. So it can be done. It's just I don't think anybody's getting rich off of it. I have 21 assets in the store. I sell very well. There's no way I could live off this. This is a hobby business. Well, the core module.
I'm muted again.
If you just wanted what?
I'm muted again. I was going, mute again. I'm on mute again. So if I wanted to have a low poly look terrain,
You could just take core and the low poly look
yeah.
module.
So at 6 US 25, I've now got a low poly terrain tool.
Yep.
I don't need any of the rest of the stuff.
Not if you're not going to use it. And you know, my thing with MicroSplat was to get a better terrain shader to everyone first, better than what ships, something that's faster and looks better, and then upsell modules from that. And the nice thing about it is that you can build exactly what you need. And a lot of people send me their projects to debug things and stuff like that. And what I see is that a lot of people, end up owning quite a few modules because it becomes a little bit like this thing of like, here's a button I push and it makes my game look better, And so they're like, oh yeah, my game would look better with that. All right, click. And so, I think it works out. I think, I get like 1,000 downloads of MicroSplat free per month. And then in terms of actually converting sales, it's a very small fraction that buy. So I don't know if those people are just, downloading and messing with things, or whether they're actually building games. I don't know what the ratio of real games just using the base one.
1,000 a month. Are you not tempted just to stick it on for a $5?
Well, I wouldn't get 1,000 a month then.
Yeah, you might get 500.
I'd get 40 or 50.
You think that even putting it down to a $5?
Yeah, I mean the cost of just having a cost is a huge barrier. It's just like free to play. Like free to play games, you get 85%, 90% of your users never.
Why don't you put some microtransactions inside MicroSplat itself? So so it loads up. It goes, thank you for choosing MicroSplat. Now enter your credit card to get these cool gems.
Yeah. It's interesting because the business model on the asset store is kind of fundamentally broken because the amount of support you have to provide is so high, and the only model is really about selling new things, right?
Exactly.
And so I learned very quick when I was making MegaSplat that I reached a sort of a saturation point where it didn't matter how many new features I added. It wasn't going to sell more or less. Well, it could sell less, but it wasn't going to sell any more than it was going to sell. And that people couldn't understand what those features were, right? They couldn't, I could add like 10 new things, whatever, but they made the purchase decision based on the same info that was up there. So the module approach is a way to solve that better. But, it's without introducing new modules, you eventually reach a point where you're not getting paid for your work.
How popular is the terrain collection pack or the bundle?
It is pretty popular. I mean, I think a lot of people love it because they don't have to download all the individual modules that are in it, and they can just download that and then a couple of the other ones that they have.
Yeah.
When they get updates.
So much.
I update a lot. I update like once or twice a week. The other thing about it is that the reason I created it is because Unity would not put anything of mine on sale, really, because it was all low price. And they tend to put high price stuff on sales. And the other reason I created it is that people don't value things when they're cheaply priced as much. So having a big package like that is a nice way to solve those issues.
Should we jump in to the lovely little gift that you sent me, the video?
Oh yeah, let's watch it.
And then you can do a share screen on your Discord and show off any new toys you want us to play about with.
Sure.
I mean, last time you came on, we played about with your mesh workflow that kind of blew everyone's brains.
Yeah.
Everyone's heads exploded when you did that. And you've just whetted everyone's appetite by saying that you're doing updates, a couple of updates every week. So
yeah, I'm pretty fast on updates. I don't like any bugs being in things that I know about, so I try to get things resolved and onto the store as fast as possible.
yeah, we don't like bugs. Right, cool. I'm gonna mute myself. I'll mute you too because we want to hear this the sexiness that is on your epic music. Hopefully, I got it working. So let's check. And we're back. How's the audio? Okay, so it went sky high. Jan's asking, did you get Roland to make your promo videos? I've been watching his Trax posts. Nice.
Yeah, pretty much. He so he started playing around with Trax because he's in my beta group, and just started cranking out these amazing videos. And I would just start being like, "Well, what if you did this with it?" And then he would get all excited and go off and do that. And yeah, he pretty much made most of that video. I just kind of cut it together with some other stuff. And yeah, he had a lot of fun, I think, and I had a lot of fun just seeing somebody, use all this stuff together. And yeah, he does great work. That was all those games he made for this trailer. He all made each of them in like a day.
Did I just put the wrong link in? Do you want to share your
screen?
Yeah.
All right.
One second. Let's try and get this to work. Da, 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 da. Can you hear the vacuum cleaner still?
Yeah.
How bad is it?
Pretty bad.
Really? You should see I've like done some MacGyver stuff. I've got a cardboard box with egg cartons all over it. I've got blankets. I've got styrofoam foam all over the microphone, and I've sacrificed a chicken.
It's worse on Discord than when it was when I was on Twitch. I don't know why that is.
Okay, that's bizarre. Right, I'm trying to go big. Let's see if this works. Here we go. I can... Hang on, why can't I... Discord, I can see it. I'm sharing it. Discord chat window. Padlocked. Dun, dun, dun. How is that, everyone? Can you all see? I definitely need... I think he needs Trax for his tanks. Or he means tax. He needs to pay his taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So how much is tax?
Depends how much you make.
Yay! For fudge's sake, he means Trax. Okay, how much is Trax then?
I think it's $30. Yeah, what I put it at.
I hope you remember what you put it at. He needs tax for the fuel tank. Tax? Everyone's spelling is atrocious at the moment. Brilliant. All right, we can see your screen. You're using a Mac. I'll forgive you.
I'm not that huge of a fan, but if you need to build the iOS.
Oh, you actually? I haven't done anything on iOS yet, so you need to use Mac if you want to build. If you want to compile for iOS.
Yep.
Well, I'm screwed.
In real, you can do it directly from Windows, but for whatever reason on Unity, you need a Mac.
Seriously, because I haven't tried yet. I've been living in a hole. So on Unreal, you can just on Windows do both. Okay. It's more.
So when I was working on mobile games, that switched me over to a Mac, and I've been on it ever since. Because when you're doing contracting, you don't know what you're going to be working on. Well, you do once you take the gig, but
that's just crazy. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to resize the screen. For some reason, it's a weird size. Maybe if I do monitor instead. There we go. That's better. How's that, everyone? Is it looking good? We can see your white ball.
you see my balls.
You can see your balls and your brick behind it.
Mm.
What scares me is how much is this actually eating up on performance?
What, Trax?
Yeah.
So the biggest cost is memory, and then rendering from under the terrain. So essentially what it does is you put everything that you want Trax to interact with on a layer, any layer you want, and you assign that layer to Trax so it knows, and it'll just render all those objects from underneath the terrain to see how much they interpenetrate the terrain. And there's basically like a little offset. And then it's just basically buffer memory at that point. So you render that, and then you blitz back and forth between a buffer. You have a control over how many blitz it does. More blitz gives you a little bit of a smoother look. Less of them will get a little crunchier. And then, but like for instance, I did timings on a 980 Ti, and with a 2048 Trax buffer, which is pretty large texture-wise. Like I'm using a 1024 here. That took 0.58 milliseconds, I think it was, per frame. So if you're on a 1024 buffer, then you're looking at like, 0.15 or something around there. So it's pretty quick. A lot of the traditional technique that you would use for this requires rendering the terrain a second time. And I basically fought really hard not to do that because rendering Unity's terrain multiple times is expensive.
Yeah. You're
And
you've got a limit now on how big this terrain is, or how many.
it's a buffer around you. So right now, if I select the Trax Manager here, you'll see that this is the area in which it's going to render the tracks. And you could parent this to a player so that it's always within your view. And then you can just set the world size to whatever you want. So obviously, the bigger you make it, the lower res the buffer is because it gets stretched over a larger area. So you might need a larger buffer or whatever. Right now, at 1024 with a 200 meter, 0.2 meters is the smallest, is the pixel size. And so generally, due to NightQuest rules, that means you can present something that's about 0.4 meters in size with these things. But if I scale down the area or increase the buffer size, then I can represent smaller and smaller things, obviously.
So how does that work in? Because it's cool to having it around the player. Let's imagine we're in a single player game. So now I've got this nice little halo around my player, so that I don't have to worry about having tracks, something I'm not going to see a mile away.
Right.
But there was something placed down, it made a track. Now I go, it's no longer in my circle, and I come back. Is that original track still there now? Does it remember it was there, or is it gone?
It will go away if it's out of the buffer. Now you can make the buffer the size of your whole level, and then just basically throw memory at it, right? And have a very large buffer with like a 4K buffer over a 1,000 meter terrain or 12, whatever, and basically end up with something where it's fully preserved. But what you generally find is, unless you're doing a game about tracking, you're never going to notice,
Or you could basically, it's a feature because the wind has covered the tracks, or the rain, or the snow. Yes.
So there's other features in here. So, for instance, here you set the layer and then the buffer size and the world size. There's also this thing called the time manager. And if you turn this on, it needs to use a little more memory, 2/3 more, and 2/5 more. And but what it'll actually do is store time per pixel on the tracks buffer, and so then you can basically say how long until repair starts, how much does how long does it take to fully repair, and at what point should it stop repairing. And so the thing you can do with this, for instance, if you're doing a scene that's full of mud, because you're not working on snow, you're working on a mud runner or kind of something like that, what you could actually do is make the depressions repair a little bit very quickly. And because this interacts with like the puddles module and the wetness module, you could actually make it form puddles in the track and then have it kind of repair a little bit and then stop. And then every time you run over it, you're still getting an interaction because it's pushing it down again, forming the puddles and bringing it back up, right? But you're stopping before it's fully repaired so that you always have an interaction when you roll over it, but you can still push all the terrain down.
Oh, I want a demo of that. You just whetted my appetite with your wetness module.
Yeah, so let me show you some of the shader features. Actually, there's three forms of tracks.
Just before you jump into that, we just got a question, which was a question I was thinking in my head too. What if, can we said about single player? What happens when you've got multiplayer with more people? He's gone into like massively, what we call massive nowadays, not what we used to call massive. 10, 50, 100 people. What would be the results? And what would be the method? Would you do it a circle per person at that level, or would you just do on the actual terrain itself?
Well, on a multiplayer game, each person would have their own circle, right? Because you only care about from your view, right? Or whichever player the camera is following, if you had like follow cam or whatever. So, generally speaking, if I was building like an MMO or something like that, the client gets a level of detail that everyone else doesn't get. Now, anybody who's running around would still interact with the buffer, would just be around their viewpoint, right?
Because both of them have got a circle, both of them will see the tracks, but they see the tracks independently client side rather than having to worry about.
Right.
Cool.
Now,
do you get a callback though? Like because you were talking about like remembering places and stuff. If there was a track made, and
Mm-hmm.
you were told, like, Trax tells you there's a track that's made in these coordinates. Here you go. Do if you want to know to do something with it, and they go, okay, the code could generate a mesh or something there, and then when the player leaves and comes back, and they just
the texture. You'd have to read the texture, convert into the track space, and get the pixel, and be like, hey, think of it as just a buffer that says how much stuff is depressed. It's one value. And so, yeah, you could, if you wanted to read this on the CPU, you could read that buffer and use getPixel or something to read it. I'm going to turn off snow, actually. Yeah, and this is basically how it's done in sort of high-end games. There's some slight differences, but you find it in one of these systems in any of these games, they're not going to usually they're not going to track trails for the whole terrain. So I do this without snow. I actually do have some effects on here. And you see this is actually leaving a trail of another texture. And I don't think I have tessellation on. Oh, I do, a little bit. So essentially you can use this to like paint whatever information you want to paint in.
So you could write your name in the snow.
Yeah, sure.
There's something very pleasurable about this. It's very well, you watch those videos of people like just baking or whatever. There's something watching your cylinder just roll through that is very comforting.
But you get a reaction and it feels good. I mean, like I think Roland was basically just playing with this all week because he was having so much fun, and then I introduced him to the digger integration, and he was like, "Oh, this is crazy, blowing holes in the terrain," and so combined, and they all work together, so it's really kind of fun. But so there's a snow Trax feature which I showed before, and then there's also the Trax texture, which you can set to, you can turn it off, and that means that you wouldn't have any interaction with the terrain. You can set it to no texture, which just lets you tint the textures that are there and adjust the normals. You can set it to be a single texture, or you can actually give it an array, which means for every surface on your terrain, you have a set of textures for what the tracks look like when they're on there.
No way.
Yeah, so if you look here, these are leaving a different texture on the grass than they are on the mud bits, right? And so you just go into the texture array stuff and pack a texture. Like if I look at the Trax texture array here, you'll see that here I have a Trax array, which I have, here's my normal textures, and then here I just pack one for what the Trax should be.
That's just crazy.
And then you go in here, we've got some other stuff. So let me just show you some of the properties here. Interpolation contrast, you guys know what that is. It's a blending. You can control, here's where I put in the two arrays. You can control the UV scale of that stuff separately from the main UVs. You control how much of that texture is blended in, so you can see I can blend that out. And then I have this normal strength here. It's a little hard to see from the lighting angle we're at, but let me turn around. And what this is actually doing is it generates a normal map for the tracks to make them look a little more depressed, and so you can control how strong that is, right? And that, when you don't have any tessellation to show it off, that can help. So you can see here as I increase the displacement amount on my tessellation. One of the things I do want to add, though, is the ability to have triplanar in the Trax edge here, just in the edge, so that you don't have to pay the full cost everywhere. And with tessellation on, it obviously presses the terrain, and you can control all of that too. And it's got per texture properties here for both the opacity per texture, so you can say like, hey, this rock over here, don't leave a track, right? And then you can say what the normal strength is for each one, how much it should dig into the terrain if you want some things to be softer than others. And then you can actually give it a tint too, so if you want to just tint the texture, a little bit to make it darker or something like that, you can
That is nuts.
So, and that'll all work per texture. You can set that up however you want. And so that's super cool because you can do a lot with that. And I've got some other ideas too for pricing this up. And then, if I let's turn on lava just to make it very apparent.
Why not? Just turn on lava. Krakatoa. It's that time of the year when Krakatoa explodes.
And then lava set up, and then we go into our track stuff here. We see this filter, and I need to make this UI a little better. Lava is the last one. So this is how much lava should be in the tracks, right? And do I not have... Oh, I'm in the game view. Why is it moving the lava? Oh, the scale's probably wrong on the lava. One problem is I'm always messing with things in the scene, and then, like... Nope. I'll worry about that later. And so you can do that for wetness, streams, puddles, lava, whatever you want. So if you wanted to have a dragon leaving, fiery footprints, then the dragon could leave fiery footprints in there. And this just controls the weight of how much of that goes through. And you'll also notice that because the way the lava works, it actually can leave burn behind at low weight values too. So you can see at 0.72, we're just seeing burn surface, whereas at 1, we're seeing... so you could use the repair, again, to have it remove the lava and leave burn terrain behind by repairing the tracks buffer, right? After the dragon's footstep moves, or after a truck, steps in mud, or whatever the effect you're doing is.
That is crazy. Do you know what my mind is thinking now? Of a shoe, like a boot, with lots of nice little mesh colliders of the shape of the treads on the boot, and then just seeing that make a footprint.
Well, so one interesting thing about this is it doesn't use colliders. It actually uses the rendering of the object. So the rendering of the object will get imprinted in there, which is why the dragon works, right? It's rendering the skinned mesh of the dragon into the tracks buffer. And so it's actually the tail, when it moves, is leaving the track and everything because it's actually using the rendering object. So if you have a guy with boots and he's walking through the tracks and mud, then he's going to create tracks in the terrain there. And then if you set that repair value to repair very quickly, and then set it so it has some wetness and puddles in there, when it's when the track is really deep, then you'll get the effect of what it looks like when you step in mud, which is you usually see a bunch of water come around, and then you pull your foot out, and the water kind of goes away, right?
Hang on, are you saying that you could actually leave a muddy footprint where you see the footprint, like the boot print, the treads of the boot?
Yeah, and it would use the rendering object. Now the trick with that is to have a high res enough buffer because you need enough pixels. Right, I'm using these big giant spheres and stuff here. So what you would probably do is, maybe you increase the resolution of your buffer, but you shrink the world area way down and just have have it be really tight so that you can have lots of resolution to capture. Like you could capture a foot with the toes and everything if you had a high enough resolution buffer, right?
Fresh meat's asking. So I'm cooking, not fully paying attention, but can you trail one texture into another, i.e. bring mud into snow for, say, 5 steps? Which is cool, because you've got, like you're saying about the mud and the water, you've got this nice, beautiful, crisp white snow, which is beautiful, hasn't been trodden in, and there's a load of mud next to it, and somebody's walking through the mud, and then starts walking in this nice, crisp snow, and as he's walking, his boots are... mud's coming off his boots are getting what cleaner with the snow, but he's left this dirty, muddy footprint through the snow. Right.
So what you can do is remember that for each texture that you have a texture. If you're using the array mode, you have a texture which you're going to swap the terrain to when a track happens, right? And then in the snow settings, you can actually say how much of... where is it here? Snow tracks here. So we have our UV scale, our tint for the snow. So if we want to darken it a little bit, in the tracks, the texture blend, the normal strength again for the shading on there. And then there's erosion clearing. And so as you increase erosion clearing, what you get is more of the texture left in the track. So you can control how much of the snow is going to be eroded. There's also height clearing, which is using the height map to do that, right? So it's basically going to clear the snow off the top of the height map of the texture, whereas erosion clearing is based on slope. So you can essentially clear the snow to the underlying Trax texture based on both the height and normal of the terrain.
You like you were saying with you and Roland, how just these ideas like it'd be cool if you did this, it'd be cool if you did that. We've now got chat doing the same thing. And I love it when chat just having conversations amongst themselves. You got Jeffrey saying, does that mean I can get mud into a building? And then Dice Winch saying, you could do that by painting runtime data via the feet. You wouldn't even need tracks for that.
So if your mesh is running a MicroSplat shader with Trax enabled, then it's just going to work. Okay, so like if you look in that video, when the tank blows up part of the ground, that is Giger creating a hole and using the MicroSplat shader. And it's using the same shader as your terrain for it's a custom one that MicroSplat spits out for Digger, but it has all the same features. And so if you look, you'll see the treads are still in there. And that's because that mesh shader is doing all the track stuff as well. And so if you were to, texture a house with MicroSplat, you could have the track stuff just work on that as well.
And that's an important thing because people keep asking me, is MicroSplat just for terrains?
Not anymore. It does all kinds of stuff now. It's really a fully fledged shading system at this point. And so you can see the edge of the buffer here because I don't have it parented to something where the tracks are just fading away. Right? Because the center of the buffer is up here.
I love that there's a gentle fade out, not a sharp end. Is that editing?
Yeah, well, you never want anything to be jarring.
If two people fight in the mud, will they get dirty?
Well, that's up to your character. You have to figure out how you want to put the dirt on your character.
Can you use MicroSplat on characters?
I don't think so. Well, yeah, I think you probably could. You probably could. You would use the combined workflow of the mesh workflow, and then paint the texture so that it's all alpha, and just use the standard shader stuff. The combined workflow has its own shader for diffuse, normal map. The traditional inputs. It's kind of like the standard shader. So you'd set your character up in there, and then if you wanted to, you could turn on any of the other features of MicroSplat. So like sometimes people will do this because they want snow on objects, and so they'll just spit out a combined mode shader that just has no splat mapping on it, but then just gets the snow added from, the snow feature of MicroSplat.
So you could do that and have mud on people.
Yeah, and it would do the track textures and all that stuff.
So you go.
Yeah, and then the trick there would be that I think you'd probably run into some things trying to figure out like how you decide where, because the tracks buffer is assuming that you're on a top-down world, not on a body. You know what I mean? It's rendering things from the underside to figure out what the collision is, and then applying that kind of in a top-down methods, whereas a human body is a complex geometry. So I don't think it's the right tool for that job, but technically would the shader draw on it and do stuff? Yeah.
Old Crank's asking about the timer that you showed earlier. He's asking about does the repair times that the older tracks repaired before the newer tracks, can you also override so snowfall repairs at the same time? So that's what you touched on earlier. So
you mean have a thing where tracks repair based on when they happened, but there's also a continuous amount of repair regardless of those settings.
Yeah, so like a repair override.
Right. I don't have that in right now, but it wouldn't be hard to add. What's storing in the buffer that's extra is the time that the depression last was achieved, right? So every pixel in the buffer knows how long has it been since something pushed me down, and can repair and have those kind of times. The nice thing about a constant one is that you don't need the buffer, the extra buffer space for time to do a constant repair. So that's something I should add anyway, so that if you just want tracks that slowly repair, you can have that and not pay the memory cost of having the extra buffer.
There you go. So what happens when you come on for a chat? You get some lovely feedback that go off,
Yeah.
and you now want yet another update this week. You already do have Enviro integration and stuff. From what you even showed that off in the video.
Yep.
So
and a lot of this stuff with Enviro, like wetness and stuff. And there's more you could do there with, I don't know. I mean, it'll control the snow level and melt and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, for me, kind of the fun of this is like figuring out how all these things work together. It's like, well, what happens when what happens when a track goes over lava, or like, should lava disappear in the track? And like, that's where you get these kind of like subtle but really cool interactions. And like, even in that video, it's like I was sitting there thinking, okay, theoretically, if he blows a hole in the train and drives over it, the track should appear. But, until he did it, it's like it was all theoretical, right? And so it's neat when you see it come together like that.
So it's a bit of a Dr. Frankenstein moment.
Yeah, well,
I
try to write stuff in a way that everything can work together as much as possible, and everything considers everything else, and that the data between them is fairly light, and easy to apply. And I think there's probably more room for interesting effects, like, should tracks affect other things? It's like the tracks buffer could affect anything that's in the shader, right? Like it could affect how much tessellation there is, what color is the texture, how much is the anti-tile array applied, or like, how much is the parallax offset, So it could, in theory, be applied to anything. It's just like, well, what does it make sense to apply to? Puddles and wetness and streams and lava made a lot of sense right away, so that's what I put in. But people have ideas about things that they want to do based on the tracks buffer. It's pretty easy. Because I have my own shader compiler, I can add as many options and stuff as I want. And the challenge there is just making it still usable, right? To not bog down with lots and lots of micro options that nobody understands. And I've certainly entered into some of that territory, but I try not to.
You're not going back into where you were with MegaSplat. As you said, that was your lesson that you learned the hard way.
Yeah, it's just kind of like MegaSplat was more from the mindset of working in AAA studios and stuff, where you can go and explain exactly how stuff works, and you're designing, these kind of systems that they have to support a game, not anything anybody wants to do, And I mean, but if you look at the amount of options that are in MicroSplat at this point, it is far more than was ever in MegaSplat. So I do think they're better arranged. There's more stuff. Like I kind of really don't like that shader model and sampler mode are exposed. Quality, the packing mode, it's constantly, I see people setting that to quality, thinking it makes their shader better, but not realizing that they have to pack their textures different for it, because they don't read the docs. They just kind of go, oh, let me just set everything to quality, And so it creates confusion, but I try to minimize that stuff.
We've got a couple of more questions talking about.
I can check.
I'm not sure if you can see from Jeff who's saying, can I simulate a volcano with this? If I have a volcano underwater, it will form an island to stay on forever or temporarily.
No, because it doesn't change the terrain. But there is the lava and streams module, which lets you, pour lava over your terrain. And there is the digger integration, which lets you modify your terrain. So you could use those together to do pretty much whatever you want.
See, there are no such things as silly questions. What about this one? And I know the answer you're going to use for it. But
this, by the way, is what the Trax buffer looks like.
What's this one?
This is a visualization of the Trax buffer.
Ah.
I don't know if you ever noticed, but there's all these different visualizations in MicroSplat for different reasons in the debug section. So like this one actually shows me, I have a very extensive optimization system in MicroSplat for culling samples that aren't needed. And this one will actually show me how many samples we're doing on the terrain. And the trick is right now I'm set to 90. Let's try to go 40 or something. When we start to see yellow, that's when we know we are above the... So essentially, let me see if I can explain this. This is showing how many texture samples we're taking as a 0 or black to red gradient. And when it goes above the number I set here, debug sample divisor, it becomes yellow. And so where we're seeing yellow are places where we're doing over samples per pixel of textures. Now, if you look, this shader in the debug section says that it does 21 plus 24 plus 4. So it does about, what is that, 49 samples per pixel, and about half of those are being saved by the dynamic, what I call the branch sample system. And on more expensive shaders, it saves more. And so I have visualizations for all this stuff, so you can actually go in there and you can tune everything and see exactly what the shader is doing.
Man, there's so much in there that you don't realize is hiding about. Right, next question. Is there an option for earthquakes to split the earth immediately? And if you have earthquakes and if you have an explosion, there will be two types of traces.
You mean like something happens in this whole terrain, like splits in that down the middle?
Yeah.
You could probably do something like that with Digger, although modifying a massive terrain is probably going to be slow for various reasons.
I thought you were going to go down the Digger integration route.
If you want to do fundamentally physical changes to the terrain, that's where Digger comes in. And they can be, what you always see in the demo is somebody digging, right, and making holes in like a Minecraft style. But if you look at that video Roland produced, he's just doing little divots where the explosion happens, right? Yeah. You don't have to chunk a massive amount out of your terrain or build, it doesn't have to be this clay that you work with. It can actually be something that's kind of tough and that you modify, carefully.
I don't want to go down too much of the Digger because it's, obviously you've got integration, but it's not your asset. The only concern I've got is like
having loads of integration. It paints, it handles the wetness and all that stuff. You can go make a cave and then put a stream in it. It's like we built a whole system so that those shaders would support all the MicroSplat features.
Have you seen an impact of like having too many things diggified in your scene?
With Digger, it's pretty good. I'm really impressed with that asset. I think it's a really smart asset in that it's a voxel engine under the hood, but it's not just for voxel games. It works very well for places where you want a little bit of voxel, because you want some overhangs, you want to like dynamically change the terrain in some way. And it feels like you're just able to do this with Unity terrain, which is what's so cool about it.
Yeah, so clever. The minute you realize it's voxels, oh my god, genius.
Yeah, but normally when you see voxel terrain, you see this big Swiss cheese of terrain that you can go play with, and it's very cool. But that's a totally different kind of thing than a more realistic thing. But because Digger works with the Unity terrain, it just kind of slots in there in a way for like minor modifications to the terrain or dynamics you want to add. And that's really cool. So yeah, and in terms of performance, it's basically how big is the terrain and how much of it is modifying at once. The more it has to modify, obviously, the more mesh it has to create and deal with. So but it seems pretty damn good. I mean, it seems fast. It's all Java-fied. It seems to work pretty well.
Have you integrated with all of the different versions of Digger? Jeffrey's just making a point that there are several versions of Digger.
There's the Pro and the non-Pro. Yeah, the difference between the Pro and the non-Pro is whether you have real-time, stuff or not. At least from what I know of it. There might be some other differences, but so if you just want to do it in the editor, the regular version can work fine. If you want to do the, blowing stuff up at real time, and then you can get the Pro version and the integration, and we'll do all that. I'm pretty.
But you work with both, yeah?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the idea of, how can you use Digger in a way that's not, hey, I want to make my terrain into Swiss cheese, but rather like it's a gameplay function, right? I want to have this thing leave a crater. I want to have this thing, split the path in real time so that you're like, now you have to figure out how to get around an adventure game, or like, there's so much you can do with it.
We got a load more in chat. Chris, thank you very much. Chris just bought some stuff from the asset store, hoping that I get some affiliate money. Many thanks. Anyone using my links, they are spammed with my affiliate code, which is one thing I like about Unity over Unreal, is that the store has the affiliate, so my kids can eat. Fresh Meat says, wait, since you are shader god, Jason, why haven't you done water yet? I mean, water is just one thing Unity doesn't have. There are some decent ones, but no great ones.
It's the problem with water is very much like the problem with tessellation. It's a never-ending trail, okay? Because you're like, now I need... Like, I've done some water stuff. I have some stream stuff in here. I worked on Cascade a little bit, did some shader stuff for that. But it's like, as soon as you get the water looking right, it's like, well, now I need the boat to move with it in the physics. So I need to recode that so that the physics simulation can use that data. Or now I need to, and it just sort of cascades into this never-ending supply of work to make it good, right? And because this is a hobby business, it's very important to me that everything is maintainable. I crank out a new module. I have some support, for that module, obviously, but it kind of becomes a done thing. It's not a never-ending mission to keep improving that module, though I do spend years improving them. So I've been, improving a lot of the modules for a long time.
But at which point are you going to draw a line and just say, okay, this module's done, pin, won't touch it again? Does that ever happen?
I keep thinking I've reached that point, but then I think of something. Or usually thinks of something that's cool, and I'm like, okay, I'll put it in,
So at no point are you going to go, even though I thought of something, I'm not going to add it because I made a conscious decision that this is now done.
Not if it's cool, I mean, what are you doing this for then,
I love that.
Where I do run into things sometimes is like, I have, like when I did, I had the texture cluster module out, and then Eric from Unity released a paper on stochastic blending, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I spent a bunch of time researching that and said, you know what, I don't like all this. This is way too much work for something that doesn't look good enough. I think we can do it all with a height map operator. I came up with stochastic height blending from that. And then I was like, well, I could sell this in another module, but I just put it in the texture cluster module because it just felt like it was part of that module. And so sometimes I run into cases where it's like, wow, like for instance, there are a couple different ways you can do terrain mesh blending. And I would like to explore those, but it's a lot of work. It has a lot of like the trade-offs, and becomes confusing for the user if there's 3 different ways to do it, each with different trade-offs. And besides that, it would all get dumped into the same module, so I wouldn't make any additional money. So that's one problem with my current model, is that sometimes you run into cases where there are like a dozen different techniques to do something, and you have to choose one. Because, you just can't justify doing the Zelda-style terrain blending and this style of terrain blending and that style of terrain blending, because you'll spend forever just working on one module. Yeah. But overall, I think the module stuff has really helped, because if you look at the total price for MicroSplat, it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
But for most people, they don't need it all. And so they buy what they need, it scales, and then some people are like, they just fall in love with it, and they're just like, just give me every module you have, and as soon as it comes out, they buy it anyway, even if they don't need it.
Well, I love that you say that, because Barak Dov says, oh no, whenever Jason's on, I go off and I buy more MicroSplat modules I never end up using. Not because they're not great, but because I have no real use for this kind of stuff in my own projects. It's just exactly like you said. He just sees it, goes, this is great, I want to support you, and he goes off and buys them.
Yeah, and sometimes it's for support, and sometimes it's because people love playing with things. And when you have something cool, it's like Trax has this very toyetic thing where you're like, I want to try doing this, and I want to try doing this. And Roland probably made most of those videos just because that's what he was doing. He was just excited by it.
Just having fun.
Yeah.
Talking about having fun with crazy things, Mecha90 is saying, can you, for example, get stuck with a vehicle and skid on the same spot, and the longer you skid, the deeper the tracks, just like spin tires? So it's like you're saying about you're basically just telling that area how deep you want that track to be.
What you have to do there, you're definitely going to have to program all the resistance and that type of stuff, right? I'm not touching that. That's all the physics of this is the real thing. But if you had all of that, what you would actually do is there's an offset for the buffer that you can modify. And what you actually probably would do is, instead of actually having the tires of the actual vehicle rendered in the Trax buffer, what you would basically do, and I'll just do it with a couple spheres or something. So let's say we have a sphere here, and that's your tire, right? For shits and giggles. Probably what you would do is you would start with the fake tire up here, and then as you want to depress the mud, you would just move it down until it reaches the final depth, right? You could read the Trax buffer and be like, oh, you're at 0.8. Okay, that's how far you are, so let's just move this down a little bit so that each time it kind of digs into the buffer more than it did the last time.
And that is exactly what you were saying earlier about reading the buffer, like where you are, and...
Yeah, so... I'll show you, I have an example of this in... By the way, the Trax docs are included in the core module, so you can look at them now. But I think at the bottom here, yeah. So I did a Jeep or a truck, and basically to give me more control over how it interacted with Trax, because at the time, for the depth of snow I was dealing with, it was essentially hitting the bottom when I didn't want it to, and so basically I just did a crappy, sphere and whatever model of this thing where it had an infinitely high, buffer there. For the bottom, so the bottom would never drag. You'd only get the tire tracks. But if the thing flips over, you get the top, right? And so you could do something like this, where you play with these tires to make them, either bigger or smaller, or move them up or down to control how much you're getting into the buffer. And the same thing's true for animal trails. If you have a rabbit who's supposed to run on the top of it, then you could just basically render his collider or his Trax mesh, whatever you want to call it, higher up so that he doesn't sink as low as the dog does, right?
That's genius.
So yeah, there's, with a lot of things in game development, there's simple hacks that let you simulate things, and you really want to build the simplest simulation that you can possibly get that still gives you the most potential outcomes.
Yeah, your cheapest route to get to the destination that you want to get to.
Yeah, it's when the Sims AI, people will play that game and they'll be like, oh yeah, and then this person didn't like this person, and blah blah blah, and they'll see all these things in it that aren't really in the programming at all. It's actually very, very simple kind of needs response model that produces when we have this sort of if they spoke and they said everything that they were doing, they would sound stupid. But because they don't speak, we project all of this behavior onto them that isn't really there. Okay, so in a game I was working on the AI, we didn't have anything sophisticated with the AI. We didn't even have good pathing or anything. But what I did was make it so that when you had a group of them, you could set one of them to have a chance of essentially playing in a moat before it ran over to try to kill you. And so we would set it so that one of them would basically point. Okay, it would point at the player that was like detected, and what would happen is all of them would detect the same player at the same time. They'd all say run to the player, but one of them would point first, and everybody would determine, like the community had this whole thing about it is, oh, that's the leader, and if you take out the leader, then the other guys are killed. None of that was true. Okay, all it was doing was pointing. So the illusion is far more important than the reality of the simulation. And so the illusion of a rabbit being lighter than an elephant is just a matter of messing with its like physics representation effectively. And the illusion of something being stuck in the mud is just a matter of making the car not move, which is part of your physics sim, and then moving these tires down as it's supposed to dig more into it. Right? To the player, it's exactly the same thing. You don't have to physically simulate it all unless you're really trying to build a simulator that's about how to get a car out of the mud. You know?
That's just crazy. I love it, man. We've got a load of people in chat now who've just run off to the store and have bought stuff. Old Crank saying that module pack is going into my car. I've been putting off far too long and it's such a great set of tools. MicroSplat is so much faster than the others I've tried, which is an interesting point because we chatted offline. You were saying that MicroSplat's got a lot faster than it did even when it first came out.
Yeah. So I have a great video on my YouTube channel where I put together a presentation on this because I'd done a couple talks on it at various like Unite stuff and things like that. And essentially the major architectural optimization in MicroSplat is that if we have a terrain and we've got 32 textures on it and you're viewing it, you know, and it's got all this texture data and stuff, chances are each pixel doesn't actually need to sample all 32 textures, right? Because this is grass, over here is some rock, and we don't actually need to sample the ones that aren't there. And so the first set of optimizations that MicroSplat does is it basically samples all of the splat map textures or generates the splat map data procedurally, because it has a module that'll do that, the runtime procedural texturing module. And then it takes all those splat weights of up to 32 terrains, it sorts them and says, give me the top 4 for this pixel. So now, like traditionally, the way this would work is, let's say I have a normal map and a diffuse map on my terrain, right? So I have 2 textures I need to sample. And let's say I have 32, or let's just say 16 different textures,
right? We're getting into some maps now.
Yeah, so 2 times 16. So right away we have 32 textures we need to sample, okay, as our base. Let's say we're doing distance resampling where we want to sample those all again at a different UV scale to mix in. Okay, now we have times 2, because now we need to do 64 samples. Let's say we're doing triplanar texturing on all of that. Triplanar texturing requires 3 times the number of samples. Now we're at 192 samples. Let's say we're doing stochastic height blending, which is, again, 3 samples. So now we're at 576 texture samples. That's individual fetches into memory for texture. Okay? So remember that number, 576. Now
okay.
Let's say we do it with the MicroSplat technique. Okay?
Let me write down 576. Because I can't remember things. 576. Write it down.
Right. So now we still have our 2 textures. We have diffuse and normal for each surface. But we pre-cull all this stuff so that we only sample 4 per pixel. So instead of 16, we're at 4. Okay? So now we're at 8 textures. We do triplanar. We do distance resampling. And now we do stochastic. Now we're at 144 samples. So we're at 1/4 the memory fetches that we had to do just by doing the culling. Okay? So then I do additional optimizations there to make less. For instance, distance resampling does not have to, it has a switch. So you can say, you know what, just give me the top 2 textures of that. So it's not times 2, it's times 1.5 instead, right? And so that can really drive down the number of a sample. But 144 textures is still a lot of texture samples. Okay? So the thing I introduced recently, because I was on a project that was using like where it had to have triplanar, it had to have stochastic, it had to do procedural texturing, it had to do like all this stuff to work and have its own whole system. And I was like, well, okay, I can use dynamic branching to get this down more. So let me just grab a scene here. Oh, not this one.
I love it when you're talking German to me and I pretend I have a clue what you're talking about. It's awesome.
Well, I mean, you can imagine that, you know, sampling 140 textures is a lot faster than 5, right?
I know I can do one number smaller than another number, and
Right.
and have my brain will interpret that. That part I'm nodding around, going, well, that number's a lot smaller than that number.
Right. So here we go. Triplanar, stochastic, and do I have distance resampling on? I have detail noise. Distance resampling. Let's just put just the albedo. And so MicroSplat will actually show us how many samples this is supposed to take. Okay? And this is a heavy shader because we've got those multiples in there, like triplanar, stochastic, which require us sampling everything a whole bunch of times. Wait for that to compile. So every time you change something in these settings, MicroSplat actually regenerates the shader code so that it's super efficient. And so here in the debug, we see that the current shader we're doing is taking 126 samples per pixel. Okay. I have this optimization here called branch samples, and when you turn that on, and in this case I have it on aggressive, which means it's going to do as much as it can. Oh, did your hairdryer turned off?
You just enjoyed the mute button for a second.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to switch this to show how many samples we're really doing. I'm going to switch to sample count method. And what this does is I instrumented the shader, so everywhere it samples the texture, it increments a counter. Okay? And so now the shader's already done the big cull for us from 500 textures down to 144 or 126 or whatever it was in this case. Now let's see what it's actually doing. So in red, we see how many samples it's taking. And we have this number down here. You can see that I have this set to 80. So anything that is more than 80 samples will turn yellow. And so if you look, there's a pixel over there.
There
that's
it is.
Yellow. So
And there was another one just underneath. There you go. There's a few of them.
They are taking 80 samples now. So we've saved 40 samples on those. But if we try to find the average here by lowering this, and we get the image to kind of like the average red and yellow, it's about 50-50. We see that the average number of samples it actually has to take is 35. So we went from 500 samples per pixel to 35 on average, okay? And what's the best pixel? The best pixel is going to be when we don't see any more red bits. And that's going to be right about there. So around 14. So that means on this terrain, instead of having 500 and some
76.
samples it has to do, it's taking 14. That's why MicroSplat is so fast.
You don't, but it's all well and good us saying, look, all these optimization, but it doesn't impact the quality of the end result. That's the important thing.
Yeah. You get the same quality, but it runs a whole lot faster. And you can actually see when I change things like the interpolation contrast here, you can see these numbers are changing. Why are they changing? Because we're either getting a blurrier texture where more textures are getting blended together, or we're getting a less blurry texture where it's more height blended. And so all of those performance factors you can now visualize shader, and it has this whole, and these are all described in the optimization doc, it has a whole bunch of different debug modes here for seeing these buffers so that you can actually visualize like, okay, how much is triplanar costing me? Can I tighten up that contrast a little to save a little bit of, a little bit here, or like, and so this is what lets people use this on VR games and still use triplanar and stochastic, right? Which are way too expensive to use normally on something like a VR. I know you're not going to get that on Quest, but you'll get that on like a Vive, right? Quest is like all bets are off, just turn everything off. Like it's a beast of a thing. So the first optimization was what I shipped in MicroSplat, and just like a month and a half ago, I shipped this new branch sample one. It makes it about 3 to 4 times faster than it was previously, and it was already multiple times faster than any other shader in this. So now it's just blazingly fast. And the point of that is not to get the highest frame rate as possible. It's so that you can turn on cool, right? It's so that you can have dynamic streams and terrain blending and texture clustering and triplanar texturing and still maintain like a reasonable frame rate.
But that doesn't. I mean, people who already had a project and now they update. They do a Windows update from the asset store. Would that have broken their previous project?
No.
So basically, they get all the benefit and they don't see any negative impact of
yeah. Well, in fact, you can turn off that the second. But this branch samples thing, if you want to compile it out, because I was worried that on some low-end phones or that it might not be an optimization, and I also there's some trickiness into branching on a GPU, especially around texture sampling and things like that. And so I wanted to be able to turn things off in case I broke anything, and so that's why there's these multiple modes here. But it seems stable enough now. And it turns out that it's fast enough on basically every GPU that anybody's tried it on.
Oh, cool.
Now, the thing is, if you have a really beefy, you might not see that much savings because the thing can chew through. Like a modern high-end desktop GPU not only can compute a lot of data, it's designed to look up gigabytes of data per frame. So,
what would you class as high-end modern? Because they are coming out quicker than I can keep up with them.
I don't even keep up with them. I do everything on a laptop. I feel like that keeps me honest. If I can get my stuff to run at high frame rates on a laptop, then I know it's going to be great for everybody who uses it.
Well, what's the GPU you got on your laptop? It's probably more powerful than mine on my desktop.
Probably not. It's a mobile GPU, right? What I got in here? Radeon 560X with 4 gigabytes. So good for a laptop, not good for a PC. But I like to program on whatever kind of like mid to low end, so that I just get I'm always face up with my frame rate issue. Right.
I love that phrase you said. It keeps you honest.
Yeah, it does. If you have this giant beef system and then you make all this cool stuff and then you're like reach this point and you're like it doesn't run on a machine. You know what I mean?
It's got to run on a potato.
Yeah.
My PC basically has got a kebab inside the case as well.
Android and Quest and things. Those are kind of their low end devices that you need to specifically optimize for. But this kind of keeps me honest in a PC way, right? Of like, okay, great. I'll, make sure that everything works with a reasonable amount of speed.
Good, I say. Laptops are good, fantastic. Otherwise, they make me cry. Oh, Alona Wolfs came in. Hey, I actually just bought MicroSplat and the URP add-on recently. Well done, Alona Wolf. I hope you used my affiliate link so that my kids can eat. No pressure. They're just saying, Daddy, when are we allowed food again? And I said, we have to wait for people to buy more stuff off the asset store. Don't feel pressured into clicking that link, anyone.
Actually, just before you buy any assets, click the link and then go buy whatever you want.
Exactly. Just click it. I'm going to get t-shirts made. Just click it.
Just click my link.
Alona Wolf says, oops, don't admit it. Alona Wolf just lied. Yeah, of course I did. So good. I love this image now that we're seeing with the desert. Like, you've got that view. Looks beautiful.
Have you seen the procedural texturing stuff?
And you're just showing off now. You're just moving it around.
Yeah. So this is this all works at runtime. I built it for a project where we couldn't possibly store splat maps because it was planet scale stuff. So we had to generate them all, and so you get all these nice curves and everything. But then this just the game, and you can bake it back down for an optimization. But if you have a game where you have fully dynamic terrain, like one of the funny things that happened this weekend is right now Digger is not supported in HDRP with my integration module, and because there's a bunch of code I got to do there to make it work. And but one of my users was like, "Oh, it's no problem using procedural texturing." And so then when he's digging into stuff, it's just procedurally texturing it all because it doesn't need to use splat maps and stuff. So, but yeah, it's nice. You can very quickly texture things, and then you can bake this back to the terrain if you want to. This also works on the mesh workflow as well, so you can texture meshes this way, which is kind of a cool way to do it. Yeah, you have layers, and it's pretty sweet.
Grass at the ceiling.
Grass at the ceiling? What does that mean?
I don't know. It's a song maybe. Planet-sized. Gildar's going in for that. Some planet-sized procedural texture. People just now spouting out random phrases at us. Digger and procedural texture.
Yeah, it works. It'll procedurally texture the digger hole with whatever rules you've specified.
So you've dug a hole, you look up, and there's grass. Is that what you're saying, Sengoku?
If that's the case, that would be something for the digger module to deal with.
He says correct. Yes, that's what you're referring to. It wasn't like you walk into your house and suddenly you look up and there's a garden above your head. Well, that would be interesting.
I hate tiling, so I'm just gonna. One of the things I hate is that because everything's in modules, I ship things only using stuff in that module. So I can't do something like turn on stochastic and then have all the tiling of this rock just disappear.
So we have got some eccentricities with the module workflow.
Yeah, I mean, overall I think it's a big win. But in terms of like providing a demo that uses the best bits of everything, it's harder, right? But now we don't see any tiling on any. We turned on stochastic.
I love that.
If I turn it off, you'll see the tiling right away. Right there. You see it repeating. Especially over there.
Yeah, you can really notice it.
Yeah. And you can use the procedural stuff to break that up. Some people prefer to like use noise layers to all that rather.
How much to buy Jason and his family? Don't worry, I'll feed them well and keep them dry and warm. But for how much? It's actually a very interesting point. Are you, because this is your hobby, but obviously you've got a full-time job where you're paid to do work on games and do nice AAA projects.
I work on things that I want to work on.
So is there a chance that there's somebody in his bedroom with an exciting project that would say, "Hello, Mr. Booth, how would I be able to hire you to do some freelancing on my project? Here it is."
Yeah, so my rate's $150 an hour. I do a lot of work for companies and things like that. For me, it's very important that the work be something I'm interested in because I feel like that's what makes me do the best work. And I'm not interested in doing, I'll get offers to be like, can you, write this client server thing for us? And I'm like, I could, but I don't want to. You know what I mean?
Exactly what you mean.
So I'm looking for interesting projects. If they're out there, if somebody's, got something that is interesting to solve. That's why I ended up on the planet scale stuff. It was an opportunity to use this tech and then solve new problems with it and make the modules better and more robust and see them ship in a really cool game. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. I did some medical imaging VR film with some people this year. That's it was supposed to be premiering now at a bunch of festivals, but then all this stuff happens. So yeah, so I just try to find interesting stuff to work on. I'm also not in a bad place financially, so I don't have to work to survive.
That's always a good thing. Being able to pick your projects, not go insane.
Yep.
And that allows you to make fun stuff like this as a hobby so that other people can be sitting there making games in their bedrooms. And one day, we'll be seeing this on Unreal.
Well, we'll be seeing some of it. I don't know which parts yet, but the main thing I want to do is speed it up so that you can. Because the main complaint I've heard from everybody is like, looks beautiful, but I can't have more than 4 textures. And between MegaSplat and this, it's like I should be able to get it much faster and be able to have. Because like the nice thing about MicroSplat is that it's unaffected by how many textures you have. MegaSplat in the same way. I mean, it is to some degree in that you're fetching from more textures, but it's not like a linear increase in cost when you add more textures to your terrain, because I'm pre-culling them, because I do all this dynamic stuff. It doesn't affect it nearly as much as it does traditional shading. And so I think that's the magic sauce. That and like stochastic with triplanar done right. I think that's the kind of magic sauce I want to bring there, because the Unreal community has a very active kind of like community that can easily write their own shaders and things. And so it's really about like, how do I make it so that your stuff runs way faster, but you can build your own stuff? You know what I mean? It's a different community over there with a different kind of workflow and need. And so I have to figure out what matches what they do over there.
That basically is a change is as good as the rest in that regard, because it's a completely different mindset that you're working to.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes back to what you were saying earlier. So, you said that there could be 16 different ways to solutions for the same problem, but in the modular way that you're doing MicroSplat for Unity, you're always restricted. You can only pick one. Whereas now, you can explore those different avenues. And
I can explore different ones and see, and then maybe bring some of those back if it makes sense. Or like I'm a big believer in building synergy between what you're doing. It's like, how do I take what I've already done and use it in new ways to kind of continually make everything better? I love look at stochastic on this. Like, you don't see any tiling whatsoever. It just works so well.
I don't know, how much of an impact is that on the performance now? Like, how much memory are we?
Well,
because you were showing us the maths earlier.
Yeah, so originally it would be 3 times the sample counts, but because I cull it, if we look here and we go to the debug, you can look at the stochastic cluster count here. We can see how it branches essentially. And what you'll see is there's these little patterns, and darker is better. So basically, the clusters are like hexagons, essentially. And I tighten up the radius in here to get this nice square. Like, the original code would not produce this. And so this gives me a big little clump of savings. And so this is actually just doing 1 texture sample in that whole area. This is doing 2, and this is doing 3. So I'm only paying the times 3 on this little bit here. I'm paying times 2 here, and just paying the regular price here. So overall, that makes it pretty fast. It's still more expensive, but not like the default implementation would be.
Yeah, and it's more expensive, but the output is
so much better.
I mean, it's crazy. Like you said, like as soon as you turn it on, there was a complete difference.
Yeah, and my whole thing is like, try to get to the amazing result you want. Like, that's the main focus, and then you figure out how to make it fast. And when you build architectures, figure out how an architecture can be fast and perform what you need it to do. And then as you build on it, you look for new opportunities to speed. Right? It's kind of like they're kind of inversed.
Yeah,
when I think about architecture, I'm like, how flexible can this be and still be fast? Because speed is flexibility. The more speed you have, the more you can put into the game, the less time you have to spend optimizing and like making things work, and the better your experience. So, if I can find a way to not do LODs or not, those are huge savings where I can focus on my game instead of focusing on trying to make it fast enough. And so when you provide a tool or an architecture, you want to make sure that that architecture has these properties of speed in it. And this is where dots and ECS and all this stuff is kind of going, right? It's like, how do we do speed first and then figure out how to make it? I don't know, they haven't quite got there on the usability side. It's compared to doing that stuff in C, it's a hell of a lot more usable, but compared to writing mono behavior.
Well, it's the more complex something's going to get, you're always going to compromise on the usability. I got Jeffrey, have you been drinking? This package is mainly for visualization. If I have a highway that is dirty, and the rains will wash if I use Enviro.
The rains will wash.
So you've got a dirty highway that then gets cleaned when it rains from the weather integration that you've got.
Well, that would be something you would have to do either for shader for your road, right? Wetness here, I can turn up and down the minimum wetness. I even have tools in here that let you pre-compute wetness so that you can have a mask so that if you have a bunch of picnic areas that are covered, they won't get wetness, right? But the trick with a lot of this stuff is that you have to make it all work together, right? So if you're buying an asset from the store that is for roads and it doesn't support Enviro wetness, well, then it's not going to get wet, right? And so that's partially what like the mesh workflow is about, is like, you can make a shader which doesn't have any splat mapping whatsoever in it. There's a switch here on MicroSplat. It's actually only available when you're on a mesh, but it lets you disable all the splat mapping tech. So you're not paying any cost for that. And then you can just have like, it's this thing with snow or this thing with wetness, right? And so you can generate shaders that you can use for things that have these extra features on them so that you can then apply that to your whatever. Won't cover every case, but I'm trying to cover more and more.
When you were seeing you with your balls earlier, I was thinking this would be great, but I want to drag his balls in the editor so that so as soon as I click play, those lines are already there.
You would have to just restore, like if you want to save and load essentially the state of the buffer, you just have to you'd have to write some code to serialize that to disk. It's a texture. So you write the texture to disk, you load it up, and you split it to the buffer. Wouldn't be that hard to do.
Does your package have integration with Enviro? Yes, it does.
Yes.
My question to you is there any other weather tools that you've integrated with? And what is your mindset when you go to integrations with third-party tools?
It depends on the tool. Some of them have just integrated with me, and I didn't even know. So what I did for weather and stuff is if you look on, actually we don't have snow on, but let's just turn on wetness for a second, or puddles or something. I basically have a system here that lets you turn variables into set. And so this is originally what Enviro did. And if you look at
when you're breaking up, turns variables into what now?
Globals. So if you look here, see this wetness range? This is the minimum and maximum wetness for this scene. So if I turn it up, you see everything gets. If there's this little G here, if you hit this makes this a shader global variable. Anything in your code base can just call shader set global, give it the wetness parameter range name, and then set those values. And it doesn't have to like link in with my asset or know which materials have it. It's just a global, right? And so I basically expose this stuff, and then anybody can integrate with my stuff without needing to even contact me. Like I talked to the Enviro guy like twice, and then I just told him, hey, these are the properties. So And I actually wrote a thing that lets you put these on the timeline on the new animation, what is Cinemachine, or no, not Cinemachine, what is it? Timeline, right? The new Unity animator.
Isn't it? Okay. I can't.
What's it called?
I thought it's Cinemachine. No?
Playables.
Timeline. Oh yeah, timeline. They're saying. Yeah, timeline. Everyone says. Yeah, timeline. I'm like.
So this is a little thing on my GitHub that lets you change globals on the timeline. So basically, you can just change like wetness and things, and it doesn't. If what I had pitched originally to a bunch of asset sort of developers was, let's just standardize these parameters for like snow, wetness, etc., and then you won't need integrations. All you'll do is call shader set global and set these values, and any shader can just read those values and work with it. So in that case, I tried to make it really easy. I mean, like Digger, the problem there was that he had his own shaders, and you could paint in the caves and things like that with his shaders, but no other shader supported it. And I was like, well, let's get all that working, because if somebody wants to carve into a cliff, I want them to be able to choose which texture. I want streams and lava on that and use all the features and tracks and stuff. So we did a pretty serious integration there. So it really just depends on what the asset is and what it takes to make it good, right? Because there's no point in having, like, a lot of times on assets I'll see like works with this, and you're like, yeah, but you didn't do anything. It just works with that anyway. It's not really an integration. You're just saying it does work with each other, but you didn't do any special features for it. You know what I mean? You didn't make them feel like they're part of the same asset to some degree. And so when I'm doing, integrations like the Digger one, that's what I really want.
So that's the difference between something works with something and something's integrated with it, because then it feels like it's native.
Yeah, like people will ask and be like, "Oh, I have an Gaia," and I'm like, I don't need one. It makes terrain. I render terrain. I do the shader for the terrain. It doesn't need any special integration. Whereas like Digger required code to make it work, right? It required us really thinking about how the features work together. And then I just did one for Polaris, which is going to come out in a couple of weeks, and that required a bit of code, just a bit of like, it basically like I have there's a MicroSplat terrain shader, and then there's like mesh workflow, and then basically now I have a Polaris mesh type. And so that way it'll work with all stuff, and we did like a setup workflow, so you just hit a button in this thing, and it's like, boom, it's on there. And Enviro has that for MicroSplat. You hit a button, it turns on, these options for you, sets up your shader for you with, and I have that in mind as well, just to make the workflow nice so that you don't have to go and know you have to turn on all these little things, right?
We've got, as we're just deviating from a load of questions that were coming in. That answers my question. That was my question to you. Thank you very much. Can we bake shadows on the terrain with MicroSplat? Would it be better to use Unity's Light Mapper, or does MicroSplat also have something for baked shadows?
It uses Unity's shadows.
There you go.
Yeah, use Unity stuff. With MegaSplat, I really deviate Unity, my own containers, I have my own format. And with MicroSplat, I said, let me just fit into this ecosystem as much as possible, right? And really focus on...
So you're not reinventing the wheel in areas you don't need to.
Right. Let me use their formats for splat mapping, even though they're less efficient or whatever. Let me use that stuff, and let me just figure out how I'm going to make them performant and like feature-rich shader for Unity's system. So, light mapping, all these things are just Unity's stuff.
Well, you whet my appetite with the Polaris stuff, because I was just looking at them today. Are there any other sexy integrations that are on the horizon?
Not right now. I mean, I've been doing this experiment with putting them as their own assets in the store, which I probably should have done with the Vegetation Studio stuff. We ended up pricing both the Polaris and the Deer one because they were actually like real amounts of work. But more importantly is that if you are free, you have to have like I got 1,000 downloads of MicroSplat a month, and you don't find MicroSplat anywhere on the first page, right? Like very once in a while you'll see it on the of the training section, you know.
Really?
So yeah, it's heavily. If you give away an asset for free, it's heavily pushed down in the rankings versus paid assets.
Wow.
With a paid asset, you can be number one in terrain if you get 10 sales, right? So making them paid was a way to create visibility for the assets. And then because they have enough work and maintenance required in them, you know, it's more than fair anyway. But yeah, it was like this thing of like, do we just do this and just maintain it, or do we charge for it, or what? And neither of us really cared about the money as much as we did about like making it really cool. And so, but in the end, we decided like having visibility was worth it.
So obviously, you can't now strip out the Veg Studio integration and make it as a
I mean, app. I could, but though the $5 integration is not about the money, but you're not going to sell enough of them for it to matter. It's really about, you know, visibility, and here's a thing, and you can get this thing for it. And, you know, plus I have this little dream one day of being the only brand on the front page section.
You own the front page.
All MicroSplat, the whole front page. There's nothing else on it. I think that'd be fun.
It's not going to work if all your stuff is free, unfortunately.
No, the MicroSplat would never make it on there, but the terrain collection.
The sad thing is that that Veg Studio, because so many people are using it. Everyone who's pretty much wanted to make something would have ended up buying that as a module.
Maybe. I mean, the thing there was not that the two programs didn't work. It's that there are extra features when you have Vegetation Studio. It's basically the grass map feature, which lets you, it lets you render like a replacement map for your grass when the grass distance is faded out. And then there's a fake shadow thing, which basically lets you do kind of, they're elliptical shadows for trees that kind of look like tree shadows, but for way off in the distance. So there were extra features that Leonard and I came up with and tried to, because he was like, I can't draw shadows out far enough, and I was like, well, maybe I can put them in the terrain shader, you know. So we just built these extra features between us, you know.
Are there any of, because you've done the digger chain with him, you said the environment literally was just like 2 conversations. But are there any other asset store developers who have come out and reached out to you and said, like, would you partner with me to do something funky?
Yeah, I mean, I tried doing some stuff on MegaSplat with physics and tessellation. That didn't work out in the end. And then, like, I know WeatherMaker integrates the same as Enviro, but I never even talked to the guy. He just made it work because he read my docs and he was like, oh, I can make all these global, so I'll just do that and talk to you, which is what I wanted, right? Like, if we can do an integration and we don't even have to talk to each other, that's great. You know, like, if these things just show up, that's awesome.
So he did exactly how he should have done it.
I mean, he could have contacted me and I would have spent time with him to, you know, work it out. But because it was in the docs how to do it, you know, he just did it. I always forget about that one because we never had a conversation.
Which is a great tool because, like, you know, it's a lesson for people out there. For if you document and you expose stuff, like, you have that in your mind when you're planning something. Like you said, in the architecture, if you do it so it's fast and basically so that you can expand it, scalable.
Yeah.
And you've got blokes who are just integrating, you didn't even know it happened.
Yeah, you know, the module framework too, it's like I have studios that have built their own modules that are custom features because, you know, they want to do some like, oh, we have this radar thing and we want to put it on the terrain, or whatever their thing is. So I should talk to the Amplify guys about if there's a way to easily make it so that they could, like, I could provide a function call and they could have a shader graph for that function call. Because then you could do things like have MicroSplat be like, okay, I'm going to call out to this, shader graph you've built to modify the vertices. So if you wanted to do something that would like ripple the terrain visually at an location, you could write that in Amplify shader graph, have it working flat, right? That would be like super cool.
Every time you come on, let's say like I was confused and like say why don't you talk more with those people, the Amplify guys? Because I've got these images of like all you shader people sitting around smoking cigars, chatting about stuff.
No.
And it's like these guys have got their, basically you're doing what Unity should be doing, but better. And they've got it working. Squeaky chair, that's not my bum. Which sounds like a lot. It would have been a perfect marriage for you guys to be chatting together.
The problem with all of that stuff is dependencies are expensive, right? So if they don't have a way to spit out essentially what, especially as a CG ink, what I want to do is write something where I can just specify the function calls and their system will spit out some code to a CG for me, right? They probably don't have that because why would they, right? Like they're solving their particular problem. So then it gets into this whole thing of like, previously I've done nodes for Amplify. I know how to write a node. It's, it's not hard. It works well. But then if they change that node API, then I and learn what they did to it. And so those types of dependencies are expensive unless you do them in a way where they don't exist, right? So if they had a need to do this kind of CG include feature, then I would glom onto that and they could maintain the system that uses it, and it would be cheap. But without them needing that, it would be basically a bunch of work for just us to work together. You know what I mean? So, because nobody else could use it. Nobody else has a modular shading system that generates shaders. It's literally not much different than a shader graph under the hood. Like you have shader graphs, and then you have MicroSplat, and that's it for generating shaders that I know of. I think there's a 2D shader generator that works differently than MicroSplat does, right? Or than a shader graph, but I don't know. There's not a lot.
Look, there's a dangerous question that's just come into chat. Would you recommend shader graph or Amplify shader editor with URP for creating shaders, not for MicroSplat?
I would. Well, there's different trade-offs there. The nice thing about the Unity one is that when a new URP ships, it's updated. The downside to Amplify is that they have to scramble to figure out what Unity changed and fix it all, the same thing that I have to do. Every developer who writes something for Unity, every time Unity makes a change, has to dig through their source code, figure out what changed, and apply those changes back to their shader, which is an incredible waste of time.
Which is why you enjoy doing it so much.
Right. So I think Amplifier is a way better shader graph than these. I think it generates nicer to read code, which is useful. If you need to look through it, I think it has a better overall look and feel. I don't know how they are at scale because I don't never build anything big in a shader graph. So I don't know if one of them falls over before the other one when you have 300 nodes on it or something. But I think the API is cleaner, and it seems all around better to me. It also works with my stuff, whereas I've had to pull support for Unity's. So that would be my recommendation. It does mean if you're on the leading edge, you're going to have problems when they haven't finished upgrading to whatever the latest URP is.
Jeffrey saying, doesn't everything depend on the rating? I think matters where people rank through the site or through the editor. Many people have paid packages and are highly rated make gift packages. Therefore, packages that are free are not recommended. He's going back to what you were saying earlier. And that's the other thing, that a lot of people, they might buy something, but they don't give it a rating.
Oh yeah, and mostly what you get is people who like no matter how big the giant, like, here's where support is, thing is, cannot seem to read and just go and one-star you. Or worse, they one-star you and then ask you for support, and you're like, if you were asking somebody for help, would you open their door and punch them in the face and then be like, now I need your help? And I have no tolerance for these people, and I will light into them and get in trouble with the asset store because I don't believe in this idea that we've got in our culture that the customer is always right. The customer is often wrong. And, I also don't believe that my job is to take shit from people for money, and so I'm just not going to do it. And so the rating system is totally broken. And the only people that really, you'll get these people who write really good reviews sometimes. And, it's amazing when they do. And I don't mind if somebody writes a review that has legitimate criticism. But, like the other day, I got one on the mesh workflow that the URP version they were using, they were not using one of the, and essentially they were mad that Unity keeps changing the universal render pipeline and breaking things. And I'm like, well, why the hell are you reviewing me? Like, this has nothing to do with my asset. You know what I mean? And then you can't get in touch with the person to help them if they have a real problem. There's no way to contact them. The only thing you can do is write a reply and hope they come back and look at it, which they never do. So
you can go to the forums and type in their name that they reviewed.
If it happens to match, which sometimes it does, but it mostly doesn't.
I thought it has to match, doesn't it? No,
it doesn't match at all.
Wow.
There are many people who will leave you a 1-star review because, they have a compile error in their project that's not even from your asset, whatever stupid reason it is, and won't contact you. Will leave a 1-star review. They've never been on the forums, the system's. I mean, the asset store in a lot of ways is really messed up. You get companies that have paid for one license, and then 8 of their guys are talking to you about support issues. That aren't, a lot of the times, aren't even really support issues. It's more like, hey, we'd like this feature, or like, how would we go about doing these things? And I spend hours helping people with their project and like improving their graphics and talking them through things because I like doing that stuff. But then you get somebody who's entitled, and as far as I'm, I would take their head and shove it right up their ass if I, could do that for me. Because I don't care. I don't care if I lose a sale about it. Fuck them,
So you're saying like that people give 1 stars for not being able to download the asset from the store.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't run the fucking asset store, dude.
Trying to find the way. There we go. MicroSplat 3. There's 204 reviews. 204. Hang on. There's 204, and then we go here. It's 94 reviews. Okay, 294 actual written reviews, 204 user ratings. Let's find some. There we go. I want to go to the 1 stars.
Oh yeah.
And while we do that, Drippy said, I personally have received a lot of packages because I always give 5 stars. They're created to exchange packages to exchange stars rather than the dark side to the packages. That's sweet. So people actually, you're a regular customer. I think like Aquarius Max does that. He sees that you're a regular customer and will then reach out to you if you actually care. Doesn't work, manual useless. Follow the manual to a T. When I add MicroSplat to my terrain and add textures and update them, it doesn't add them to terrain player, so it's pretty useless. Hello. This is only 8 days ago. You should try asking for support in the clearly listed places. Reviews are not a great place for support, and slamming someone with a 1-star review is not a way to open that conversation. It's like knocking on the door and punching them in the face when they answer. Like I said, most likely you just have to push the update button at the bottom of the texture array config interface, like it says clearly in the manual. That's your only 1-star review.
Well, I've had a lot of them removed for violating, various store rules, things like that.
Also, Unity are getting involved in helping in that way.
They are starting to. They now have a 2-month waiting period. Like that review, it'll take me 2 months to get rid of it because it is not a review, right? it is a support request. And it's a support request left in a review system where I can't actually provide support. And I've clearly listed, forums, Discord, and I'm on top of that stuff. I mean, you ask anybody who gets support from me, it's usually like minutes.
Yeah, and if somebody writes something on the store, you don't get notified of it. So it's the worst possible way to do a support query.
Yeah, and they do have a notification system now, but I don't think it might not work, or maybe you have to opt into it or something.
Probably GDPR related. Yeah. I love this one. I must say, looks great on the editor, but on building and running on Android, the terrain appears completely white. Jason, please help me out here. Again, great reply. Best way to support is via the forums on Discord, as it's usually back and forth process, and downgrading someone's work is not a great way to open that discussion. Very polite, mate. Very polite. I have many users running on Android, so I'm sure it's either a configuration or device issue. Android is 10,000 different pieces of hardware, not one.
I had Unity threaten to kick me off the store once for some of my responses.
Really? So I could through gritted teeth, you're writing some of these.
If somebody is generally just confused and they're calm about it, it's like, okay, you're confused and like you need some help. Come to the thing. When somebody is entitled and being a little shit about it, that's when I'm like, just rip into people. Like
this one here. This is a year ago. And this is lovely. Not for me. Too cartoon-like. Not real. Sorry. 3 stars, which for me, 3 out of 3 stars out of 5 should be like the regular. That's an average rating of 3 out of 5. If everyone's 5 out of 5, it means everyone's perfect. That's why my YouTube video reviews, some people don't like them. Viewers like it, but some developers don't like it. So why did I get 2.5 stars? Because it was a good asset. So you got 2.5 stars because it was good. Wasn't the best thing I've ever seen. It wasn't flawless, but it was good. Why did I get 3? Because it was better than the 2.5 guy. That's why you got 3. Why did I get 4.5, not 5? Because there was 5 things wrong with it that I found, and it wasn't flawless. What do you mean it wasn't flawless? Well, 5 is pretty got to be flawless, or I basically need a new pair of underpants because I enjoyed it so much. So that's 5 stars. Right. And that's why it kind of like that's why it works for me. But so when I say 3, well, he must really like it. He gave you 3 out of 5. Well done, Jace. But he said, not for me. Too cartoon-like, not real. Sorry. Best reply I've seen. Not sure what you're expecting here. If you put cartoony textures, you'll get that kind of output. I can't make you better at texturing. Now, this is a year ago, so this is probably when you were getting in trouble with Unity. I can just make what you put in look as good as possible. MicroSplat can produce some of the most state-of-the-art looking terrains at incredibly low performance cost, and has features that no other terrain shader can match, and the hundreds of games using it are proof of that. I can't make you better at texturing.
Can't. Garbage in, garbage out. So here's an example. I don't know if you guys you're still looking at my screen.
Let me just get off the reviews. Let me get back onto the screen. Considering all the features that come for free reviews, low-cost add-ons, and the quality of the finished product, there's no reason not to give it a try at least. And then you're like, so why 4 stars? And that's like me. Like, what's wrong with 4 stars?
Well, because 4 stars, if you get to 3 stars, then you are not supposed to be featured in any sales.
Oh yeah, because that's that's why
it's Unity. Unless you happen to be Unity, who will feature their stuff even when it's got crap reviews.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Right?
Do you know what? It makes it even more of a joke. Is their state-of-the-art assets that say this is not compatible with HDRP, and hey, that's what did you got on the screen? It's like
yes. So if, for instance, I can have my packages removed from the asset store if I don't support the latest Unity.
Exactly.
Right? Here, they're featuring on a regular basis an asset, and they can't even keep up with their own engine.
Yeah, and this is a HDRP package.
Yes, and it only works on 2018.4. Has problems on that version, but does not work on anything since then. So Unity cannot even keep up with the system that they've created. And they have a team on this, and I'm a single developer coming up with crap, right? And they're featured in bundles and all these things,
And
sale.
look at the price of the Asset Store originals, right? Look at the price of that. And there's a reason why I don't buy snaps. Exactly.
This one bothered me a lot. You see my screen where it says refunds?
Yeah, exactly.
We've got. So they did an A/B test, and they put this on everybody's assets with a couple different phrases that made it sound like refunds are guaranteed. And what they saw was a 3% increase in sales. And what we saw was a massive increase in support costs and having to explain to users that, one, if you actually read the ULA, that is not the policy at all. And two, that I had users coming to me who were buying stuff that right on the asset description it says it will not do this. And they were like, well, let me buy it because I can always return it. And
Exactly.
if it doesn't do that, then oh well. And so they would buy it. Then they contact me for the refund. I spend 15 minutes of my time explaining why this doesn't work, issue the refund anyway, even though I don't have to, right? And so basically 15 minutes of my time, I charge $150 an hour, okay? So that's like costing me $30 of time to increase sales by 3%. And so we've been forced into this banner on everything without asking us, right? That is, in my opinion, lying to the user. It says, refunds, we've got you covered. No, they don't. Refunds are up to the publisher. And there are reasons that Unity will refund things, but it's basically like if something fundamentally just doesn't do what it says or work, right? And so this just increases the chance that you end up in a fight with a user because they've been told one thing by Unity that is not actually their ULA. If you read their ULA, it's actually completely the opposite of we've got you covered, So this is where the store is making things hard for people. They're making it hard for publishers. They're wasting our time. And, combine that with SRPs and all this stuff, it's really creating a nightmare here. We're not talking to each other and realizing what the side effects are. Like, great, we'll make 3% more sales because people will believe that they can get refunds when maybe they can't.
Yeah, but is that net or gross? And that's the question. They make 3% more sales, but they've had 50% more refunds.
Yeah, or even, but the thing is, those refunds cost me time. And time is worth a lot to me because that's time I can spend improving my products or working for somebody at $150 an hour. Instead, I'm answering support requests for refunds, right, that take 10 minutes each, and then Unity is paying somebody to handle that support. Probably takes a couple minutes each.
Yeah, but it's also commission. There's also commission charges as well on top of that as well, surely.
For what?
Because they've got to issue the refunds.
Oh, so, yeah.
So you've got, your PSP fees, and also if you're doing refund, which is a reversal, say on the original transaction, rather than a chargeback, so they don't have negative ratings with their credit card, PSPs, and all that stuff.
Right.
Whereas if you're forcing, no, I'm not going to give you a refund. Do a chargeback on your credit card, and then if everyone started doing that, Unity will basically get ridiculous poor score with PSPs for their merchant ID.
Well, and if somebody doesn't get what they want, they just go on 1-star. And then Unity's like, well, we can't remove that for 2 months, right? So they're creating a kind of a support nightmare with stuff like this. And support costs are the reason that you see abandoned assets. It's not because they didn't love their assets. It's because they're tired of the harassment and all the crap that goes on. And they're tired of feeling disrespected from the company that they're giving a third of their money to. And they can make a ton more money writing code somewhere else. So eventually, the eventual place for all assets is that they go, you know what, it's not fucking worth it, and they leave. So
I think it comes back to the question right at the beginning of the stream was, is this a good way for somebody to choose to make their living?
No, it's a terrible way. This is the worst job I've had since I was a paper boy. From the jobs.
Wow.
Right? Paperboy sucked because after you, at least in where I did it, after you did it, you had to go collect the money from the people, and if they didn't pay you the money, they took it out of your salary.
Really?
Right? Yeah. And so my solution to this was I would sign up people for the paper, and I would tell the paper that the top papers keep getting ripped. You got to send me a couple extra, and I would always have extra people on the route to make up for the people that didn't pay. I learned that lesson at 12.
At 12, you were a genius.
Well, I had to scam the company to get what I was rightfully owed for doing the job. Otherwise, you can't expect a 12-year-old kid to enforce that somebody pays something.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, I'm not giving you the money. Go away, little child. Although nowadays, the 12-year-old's probably got a knife.
For not paying either, right? And so this job is from a pay to quality ratio is about on par with that job. If I didn't love what I was doing and if I wasn't able to parlay that into other work that I want to do, I wouldn't bother to put MicroSplat on the store.
That's just crazy. Well, that's a happy end to that story, right? And Yolan saying that the potential support issues is one of the reasons I haven't released my asset manager. Just don't have the time now. $2. Hopefully someone's got the reference. No rating for buyers. This big problem. No matter if no rating for buyers. This big problem. No matter if you what. Jeffrey, stop drinking. I keep telling you. I was originally working on my Messi's ultimate character creator, and as Sengoku keeps on likes to point out, it's one of those. Eventually, it would get made. Now, I started adding more features based on people saying it'll be cool if you do this, and Sengoku, you're one of them. It'll be cool if it does that. So I was like, I'll go down this route of adding that feature, and it got to the point where I basically broke everything. And I was thinking, and as I was doing it, I was like, well, if this was a paid asset on the store, I'd have people asking me how to do ABC or how does 1, 2, 3 work. And if I now have written it and I honestly can't remember how I did it, how am I ever going to support this as an asset? And that in the back of my mind has always been like, well, I'm just not going to release it, or I'm going to release it with a massive writing that says I offer 0 support. And against Unity's terms, and if nobody realizes, great. If they do realize, it doesn't get put on the store.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about the asset store is that there's a desire to turn your product into whatever the person wants it to be. It's very much like games. Like sometimes a studio will post a screenshot of a game, and gamers will run with the idea of what that game is without any information. And then when they find out what the game really is, they get pissed off at the developer for not making the thing that was in their head. And they, and it's the same thing with assets. Like people look at something and they go, well, oh, maybe this will solve this problem I have. And then when they realize, like, it's not meant to do that at all, they get really mad at the publisher as if you were supposed to magically solve whatever problem they have, which half the time they don't even know. Like, I saw with one batch, I just got a review recently, or maybe it was an email. I can't remember what it was. Sorry, it's a forum post. And somebody was like, hey, I did this and it reduced my set pass calls by a whole bunch, but my frame rate didn't go up. And you're like, well, yeah, you weren't bottlenecked on set pass calls. You were bottlenecked on fill rate because you're trying to make a game on the Quest, And it's always fill rate bound, So it's like, people want a magic bullet to questions. It's the same thing. Like, I don't know do you see my post on LODs?
No, but I can imagine what is going to
So I posted something about proper generation of mesh LODs.
Can you find it?
Yeah, it's stickied on the forum now. And because basically everybody does them wrong. And it's just a lot of that people have been giving, about, what's fast and what isn't, but nobody knows how to use the stuff's true. And, it's a lot easier to the way they but it's one of those things. It's like you have to get in there and really understand what you're doing and understand where your bottlenecks are. And so selling any kind of optimization tool is tricky because it's like people expect it to magically solve whatever problem they're having when the rate is low. But that's not how it actually is. So.
Well, Dribfruit, my chat module bot thing that I'm reading, the chat Streamlab chat bot crashed as your message came through, which is why it was gibberish to me. So thankfully, looking through on the browser, and now I can read it. So Dribfruit saying, this forces options. Okay, blah blah blah. No rating for buyers. This is a big problem. No matter if you bought 500 packages or 4. And I'm going to try and pronounce your name. Asset Store does not even allow you to like the asset before you can buy or stuff like that, and it sucks. I think there's no argument at all that it's completely broken.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff wrong. It's just yeah, I sat on the Asset Store board for a little while, which was they decided to get a bunch of Asset Store developers to meet once every couple months, and it was fine, but it was mostly them pitching us things that they wanted feedback on, as opposed to dealing with the ground level problems we were having. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
they weren't looking to find what is broken so we can fix it. It was, how can we make more money?
Hey, we want to do this. What do you think? And it wasn't that it wasn't useful, and it wasn't that I don't think anybody over at Unity is trying to screw things up. You know what I mean? Nobody's trying to make it hard for anybody. It's just, they have 5,000 people. How do you get a mob of that size to move with one vision? It's really hard. And so there's all these competing things going on, and somebody's like, hey, render pipelines, that'd be great. And then before you know it, you have this massive mess that, is destroying the asset community. Because they didn't listen to me, or whoever else said, hey, we need an abstraction layer for shaders. You know what I mean? And they didn't hear that, and so they built what they thought would be cool, and now we're all dealing with it.
That's the same conversation they had about with Unit, though, isn't it? And which is why I'm always thinking, are we going to go down the route that happened with Unit when everyone was using Unit, or Unit rather, right, thinking it was going to be there forever,
and then it just poof.
Exactly. And now they were saying it won't just vanish, because there's all these assets that are heavily reliant on it and integrate with it, and all these projects that are years in development and using Unit, because it's not like it was in beta or anything.
Right.
And now it's just gone, like it never existed. Yep. And they were saying, that would never happen with HDRP, because
very welcome.
Exactly. One day they might just wake up and go, right, you were right, we were wrong. We're just going to kill it and do something different.
They will only do that if they get enough churn in the coders that the coders no longer feel that they are have ownership over it. So what happens in a large company is that they view the old code not as an asset but as a liability. And so, it's not surprising to me that Aris came up with the idea of SRP. I think the idea is actually right. It's actually a good idea. But then it was turned over to some people that have worked for Unity for a while. But then you look at the HDRP is a lot of people that had just started it. They were ramping up. And so you have all these new people, and they tend to view things they don't understand. They looked at the surface shader code and they went, this is a whole bunch of crap. I don't want to deal with this. And it's got bugs and, but it was a smart abstraction layer, and they didn't realize why they had built that abstraction layer, because the people who had built it were now working on other things and not involved with that. You know what I mean? And so they made different decisions, and then that's how things go. And eventually that code will either reach a point where people fix it enough and care about it enough that it becomes mature, or they will again reach a point where they go, you know what, we just throw this out and we need to do this instead. And when you have that many people coming in and out of the company, right, because it's a lot of coders, then that's what's going to happen a lot.
That's what killed off Unit, is that there was no one left.
Well, I mean, the same thing happened with like the GUI system. It got down to one guy working on it, who was not even the guy who like came up with how it worked. And so now they're introducing another one, right? It's a not invented here syndrome. Oh, this code must be because it's old. But that code solved real problems, right? That's what people don't realize about old code sometimes, is it faced challenges, and sometimes it's correct to rewrite large chunks of it because you started out with the wrong architecture, or like burst and dots and all these things is the architecture that if he would have built from the beginning. But I guarantee you, with what they have as ECS now, if they'd started with that, Unity would not be here today because it wouldn't have been easy enough for most people.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like all of these things come with all these side effects and all of these ramifications, and it's really hard to have new people come in and know what was good about the old system and know what you should do from there, as opposed to just starting over fresh. And there's nothing like starting with a clean code base. Like the harmonics code was 20 years old when I was working on some of it. And, there was bits of it that I hated, but at the same time, there were bits of things that I hated that were actually brilliant, problems really elegantly.
And that's the thing, is that you deviate too much, you also are starting to lose the identity of
and that's where
yourself.
Unity is risk-wise right now, is they're losing the thing that made Unity amazing. Anybody can come in here, pick this thing up, get it to do something. They can buy stuff off the asset store. If it's a decent quality asset made by decent, it's just going to kind of work. And everything will upgrade when we upgrade to new versions. I mean, I used to take new versions of Unity Studio. I'd upgrade the whole studio and I'd be like, sure. And then we got to the 5X cycle, and that started to burn us really bad. And so then it was like, we don't take any version. We're going to stick on this one until we're forced to upgrade.
Yeah.
Right. And that's got better, I think. I mean, it has its ups and downs, but now we've got all the package stuff, and now it's like a wild west of things breaking. So, it is what it is. But they need to, it's the same thing I tell, for years, Studio Max, Autodesk, those guys would come, or Maya when I was working with that, they would come and they would be like, hey, what do you need? And I'd be like, I need all this still broken. I don't need these new features you're showing. I just need you to fix all the stuff that's still broken. You know what I mean? So,
and this is the point I keep on asking, is this the reason why Unreal and Unity are so different? Especially saying Unity need to make a game to understand what the hell they're missing. And when they did that FPS demo, it kind of felt like, are they actually going to be now to try to churn out games using their own stuff to see how does it work in a real life situation?
I mean, that certainly is going to help. Though I think the problem is a big difference between making a game and getting a good game up and running, coded well, using the new stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a great stress test. It's different when you ship a game and have 100,000 people live playing it every day, and you're shipping patches to it, and the asset store or the app store comes along and says 64-bit, and you suddenly need to upgrade to a new. That's a whole mess that they just never see. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not totally true. When they got the 64-bit warning, they had to scramble to get their stuff to be 64-bit. I mean, that was hugely disruptive for their side of things. But it's hard to, even if even in a company that ships games, you have people that tend to be more on the side and are less aware than the people that are shipping. It does help. I don't know. I think the problem is they're in so many different areas that they're lacking real vision holders, and just at their scale, I don't even know how they could do that. Anti's got a vision for what he wants to do, and he's driving that team towards it. And you can argue about whether whatever, but he's got vision for it, and he's trying to keep that team on that vision, and he's trying to do that thing really tightly. And I think, Aris was like that on graphics for a while. He had an approach and a vision that made graphics a certain way in Unity. It wasn't the fastest, but it was very easy and flexible. And, and even he came up with SRPs and was like, hey, But then the actual implementation is done in a way which is kind of less flexible in a way, right? Like, so, you know, they're in a tough place. I don't envy the place they're in, actually. But I think they need to stop and make hard decisions about things like what's the most important thing to SRPs right now. Is it adding that new graphical effect, or is it making it everything just works? Do you know what I mean? And now it's time to make everything just work.
And the truth is, like, it's never really too late to make a decision, but indecision is always the wrong decision.
But momentum becomes something that people are like, well, but it's the way we're. I get it. It's like I've been in big companies, not that big, but you get a lot of momentum, and it's hard to break. You know.
Well, mate,
and you become the pariah trying to break it.
I was gonna try and keep us to like an hour or two at most.
We're way over that
because it is still a working week, even though many of us are working from home, and many people have always been working from home. It turns out. Can I get another exclamation mark Jason in chat to take you over to the sexy Jason Booth link that I have stolen in his name that takes you to the Unity Asset Store? And you can see you have got the terrain collections currently on sale. Also the HDRP, talking about its support module, is currently on sale, as well as the sexy mesh workflow that we saw last time you were on, and a load of free stuff. And everything else is like, dirt cheap as chips anyway. So there is no reason why you always have to wait for a sale to get something that is priced at €6 or €4.47 as it seems. But if you did want to buy something in a sale, you could always get a train collection if you really wanted. Exclamation mark, MicroSplat.
That is not all the modules.
No, it's 11. You got 11 of them, and you currently have made 5,000 modules. How many have you got? 26 or something? 22?
I think it's like 17 or 18.
So, yes, maximum results 24 on the page, so we haven't got a page 2. But yeah, like you got 4, 8, 12, 16. Okay, some of those are. Got one which is MegaSplat. It's a lot. And you got one batch. How's one batch going?
It never sells. I mean, it's basically dead because I'm not going to port it to lightweight render pipe or URP or SR or any of the SR. Yeah, so it's basically like there's some people who use it. It works. You know, if you're still on a standard pipeline and you're trying to get set pass calls down, it works well. But yeah.
Well, I still haven't moved. I'm still on the old pipeline, so I'm old-fashioned.
Yeah. I mean, it works. You know, you can make a beautiful game. Stuff that's in the video is on the. Actually, I don't think any of it was from the new pipelines.
I eventually got to move over, but I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Maybe, like you're saying, it's like you have to be dragged, screaming and shouting to upgrade.
I think that's a good thing. I think you have to come up with a reason why you, and that means it shouldn't break every week.
Shouldn't break every week is the best tagline we've seen all day. As just before we go, we've got here exclamation mark HDRP. Someone's written in chat, and the bot has written. I didn't write this. The bot has just randomly chosen to say 3 letters together that make one sound is called a trigraph, like the word match. The 3 letters ch at the end make only one sound. Nothing to do with HDRP being written, but the bot has basically said that is the best answer that we could come up with. And thank you so much for the follow. I got double notifications going on at the moment, which is brilliant. I just got the train collection in the cart with your link. I hope the commission works when I make the purchase tomorrow. Brilliant. It should do. I don't know how long the cookie stays because it's all cookie based. So tomorrow, if you just want to click the link again, just to wake up the cookie in your browser, that would be lovely as well. Always be safe. First thing you do when you wake up in the morning, just click a link. Or you know what? Just make it your homepage, the URL. So there you go. By the time you open your browser, you've got it set. One word thing I would say, even if you had clicked it, and this is what's really annoying, Jace, is the whole affiliate link race against time. If you click a link, right, and you put 50 things in your shopping basket, and then somebody has posted a link on the forum that secretly, like a bit.ly link or whatever, or Google link, that has got a affiliate code hidden in it, and then you click it. You don't even click purchase or anything. So you just looked at it. You go back to the store. The previous affiliate code is now overwritten with the new one.
Yeah, that's why all the ads inside MicroSplat for the modules have my affiliate link.
Genius. Genius. How many modules are there in the collection at the moment? That's why we just tried to do the maths.
Total, I think about 18.
18.
11 are in the train collection. So
you get 11 in the bundle, and then you can just spend a few quid extra on top of it, getting some more. Well, mate, thank you for popping in for such short notice. It was like 2 hours before we went live. Do you want to come on for a chat?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all stuck at home. So.
I love it. Do you want to come on? I said, so everyone at home knows, like, do you want to come on stream for a chat, Jace? And you're like, sure. What do you want to talk about? Right. I don't know, your assets maybe? Yeah. Should show some videos? Do you like cat videos? Yeah, why not? Do some cat videos.
We didn't do any cat videos.
No, we didn't. It's like the guy who makes aquas. He comes on to chat about aquas. He's like, we just start spending half an hour talking about Star Wars. So he's like, okay, I want to come back on and talk about Star Wars. I said, yeah, it'd be awesome. Let's do that. And then the new movie was like the second movie came out, and then the third one. He's like, Star Wars is dead to me. I never want to discuss it ever again. So I was like, okay, that was a short-lived stream. And today we didn't even get to see any cat videos, so we'll have to do that next time. But mate,
all right.
Thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying lockdown and you're safe.
Yeah, no, everything's fine here as long as the food supply doesn't go away.
And your massive bags of flour.
Right.
Oh, by the way,
I'll have bread.
just don't get any miscellaneous meat. Make sure it's good. There was somebody in chat who I found out like a website that does bulk, like you're saying, the massive bag of flour. So in the UK, and I can't remember who it was. Somebody asked me to send them the link, and I said message me on Discord. They didn't, and I forgot. So whoever it was that is in the UK and needs to have food delivered to your homes, and you're struggling with online delivery from Tesco's and stuff, I found a website that will deliver to you within the week, like 4 days to 5 days max. You know, they're saying in their store, and they don't seem to be inundated because they're not that well known, and you can get massive, like, you know, how big is that bag of flour you're saying?
I got a 50-pound bag of flour.
There you go, like that crazy stuff. And if you've got a massive freezer,
get it.
Say again.
Remember to click on your affiliate link.
I used to have an Amazon one, and Amazon disabled it because nobody clicked it.
Oh.
Which was pretty sad. Never mind. And on that note, have a wonderful rest of your day, buddy, and I'll catch you again when you come on.
Thanks, man.
Well, that was it for another live dev interview. We've got many more of these beautiful badges for you to watch and listen to. And if you pop over to twitch.tv/themessycoder and click on the VOD section, you can also catch the full-length interviews, all of them, over on Twitch. Actually, maybe 2 or 3 of them were missing because the videos got corrupted on Twitch. But yeah, forget about that part. Go over to allthews.twitch.tv/themessycoder. Click on that follow button and watch the VODs there. Or you can also watch them here over on YouTube. That's right, where you are now. That's youtube.com/themessycoder too. We've also got Twitter. Twitter.com/themessycoder. Pretty much anything you want to stick in front of the Messy Coder, you can stick it there and he will gladly be on the backside of it. So if you do like these videos, you want to see more, click on that juicy subscribe button, click on that magic bell. If you do like it, click it. Till next time. If you want to see more of my crazy videos, click on the left side of your screen now. And down below, there's that big juicy subscribe button. And right next to it is the magic bell that if you click it, it will tell you if I've got a new video coming out. Till next time.